Hi everyone, my name's Steve Laidlaw. I'm the founder of Stelor, and I'm going to present a webinar on Stelor PM and how it pertains to condos, HOAs, and the property managers that manage them. And basically how we've taken a reserve study and made it live, basically turned it into a capital operating system. And I'm going to finish up with showing how we integrate with Rent Manager, how we pull data from their general ledger and present it back in a custom tab to make all the reports and information very readily available for Rent Manager users. All right. So Stelor, the new standard in capital lifecycle management for condos and HOAs. We built a product to cover two customer bases. The first one is reserve study providers, engineering firms, and reserve specialists for them to write the studies with. And the second is then all that data, the complete inventory of all the commonly owned property, how old it is, what condition it's in, when it needs to be replaced, how much it will cost to be replaced, the financials of that condominium or HOA. And so all that data then after the reserve study is written is now available. It's indexed, it's sorted, it's ready to be used for things like predictive forecasting. As I introduced myself already, I'm Steve Laidlaw. My co-founder is Taylor Smith. I just started with reserve studies, but eventually we transitioned into a complete capital operating system, risk analysis, things like that that can be generated from the data that we collect. Stelor is an engineering firm. We do have a permit to practice engineering and a staff of about 10. But we also have a staff that is actively writing reserve studies on behalf of other reserve study providers. So we call this a service bureau, and that is a completely white labeled service. We are writing studies all across North America, companies under a lot of different brands. So how does that work? As I mentioned before, we have kind of an offering that is hitting up two different customer bases. One is engineers and reserve specialists. And that's Stelor BLD, that's the writing tool. It comes with a field inspection app, cloud-based capital life cycle platform, digitized reserve studies. All that information is then stored there and allows us to provide these other services to the property management in what we call Stelor PM. Essentially, that's for budgeting, forecasting, preparing annual reports for AGMs, preparing reserve plans for the next 3 to 5 years, viability scores, which is kind of like a risk assessment for what is the risk of special assessment? What is the risk of this reserve being underfunded? What is the condition of this building based on what's being identified in the reserve study? And then with that, it extends into vendor management. So we will do kind of vendor compliance, preferred vendor programs. Because we have all that data, like typical insurance broker will require 105 questions as they take a condo or an HOA out to market, out to their carriers to obtain insurance renewals or new insurance. At a click of a button, those 105 questions can be answered. It's put into a nice, easy to read CSV file, as well as all the supporting documents, the PDFs and stuff are compiled and attached, and then the condo and that broker are connected, and we've typically seen about 10 to 20% savings on insurance as a result of just better data. As well, in the case that you do come up against a special assessment, there are options like condo lending or HOA lending. And so we have a number of private lenders and banks that are referral partners with us. Great data set connected into the customer or the HOA condo and the PM, and just connects everyone. And now you have 2 or 3 banks or private lenders competing for that condo or HOA loan. Generally, we get better rates and just simplify that whole process. Right here, this is just an overview of Stelor BLD and why you should insist that your reserve specialists or engineering firms that are writing the reserve studies for your condos and HOAs, that they use Stelor BLD. Here's Stelor PM. This is the snapshot of the dashboard. I'm going to go into a bit of a software demo now. So here's condo example 1. And so as you can see, their starting balance is $694,000. They expect contributions of $342, expected $100,000 of expenditures to come out of the reserve that year. However, based on actuals, they have spent a lot more than expected. And so the expense budget is way overspent. Revenue budget, though, including interest, is a bit higher. The end result of that, though, as you can see, this reserve is coming up on a shortfall. So it's not right away, but in 2027, 2028, we start to see negative bank balances, which should result in special assessments. And as well as you get out into kind of 2040 through 40, I guess through 2050, again, a whole bunch of negative bank balances. So let's click this button, special assessments. What does that mean? What is the size of the special assessments? How big are they? When are they going to occur? And so based on this, you can see there would require $73,000, I guess $74,000 special assessment in 2027, a $750,000 special assessment in 2028, $250,000 in 2043, and then $180,000 in 2044. And on a per unit basis, we're just taking the average of the number of units. So you can see what that would cost the individual owner: $560, $5,600, $1,800, $1,300, $130. And overall, it would be almost $10,000 in special assessments over the next 25 years. All right, well, how could we change that by increasing contributions? Like, could we avoid the special assessments and just increase fees a little bit? And so as we run that, you can see that we would have to increase fees pretty substantially. Like currently we're contributing $352,000 per year. You would have to add an additional $190,000 in fees per year if you were to avoid that. So that's greater than a 50% increase. So you may actually be better off to do a couple special assessments in 2025, 6, 7, some special assessments, and maybe those special assessments are in the amount of $190,000. And then after 2028, then it reduces significantly. So from 2029 to 2043, you can actually reduce that down to just $20,000 extra. So that's like less than 5% is all that you would have to add to those fees in order to avoid the future special assessments. And then come 2044, you start to get out of it, you can actually just return to the regular funding contribution. So that's how this works. It's just quick, easy at your fingertips, ability to run these scenarios, understand when shortfalls are identified, what that means. You know what you need. Now you can cover those capital replacement projects, and you should be active in those capital replacement projects, because the longer you leave them, the worse they're going to get, the more collateral damage, and also just the more expensive they'll be. But this is ways to understand how the funding works. And then the last thing is, if you want to consider a loan, this will just calculate in the first year that you require a special assessment, how big a loan would you require. In this case, it's a $1.3 million loan. If you assume 8% interest and a 20-year term, that works out to annually approximately $135,000 to service that loan, or about $1,000 per unit to service that loan. But this is just another option, maybe something that you could use instead of special assessments. You can consider it, and now it's like, yeah, you know what? Let's actually go out and talk to some of the lenders, the condo and HOA lenders, about a loan, because this is actually a pretty good option. And so how does this all work? I mean, you're going to be in here, capital planning, reserve fund finances. We have like a bit of a setup wizard, kind of in this welcome page. You can create an annual review, create a reserve plan. And what those things will do is just walk you through a setup wizard. We have a number of reports, and that's the annual update, which is a 1-year look back, the actual reserve fund budget. If I was to click let's go 2024, that's the one we were looking at, 2024 reserve fund plan. So again, that's a 5-year plan. That's the look forward. What capital replacement do we want to do in the next 5 years? And so it will generate this report to be available at your fingertips, and runs the opening balance, expectation versus actual, and the difference, annual contributions, the interest rate you expect to earn, the special assessments that are planned, the forecasted funding balance based on the reserve study. When you come in here, it lays it all out. So in 2024, these are the expenditures. 2025, these are the expenditures. 26 and 27 and 28. And then we just run, so you can just see where your big expenditure years are. Runs a contribution analysis, compares those special assessments that we were looking at, the increased annual contributions, and now for your AGMs or to present to your HOAs and boards, you just have this report ready to go. The other thing that we have here is the annual look back. So again, this is just taking that reserve budget and you put in the actual, then compares it. And so the opening balance budget versus actual, I guess there's no difference. That was exactly it. Annual deposits, there was about 9% more than budgeted for. Special assessments, there was none. That's what was expected. And closing balance, the actual closing balance was after that year way lower. So there was a whole bunch more expenditures. The budget or what was provided in the reserve study was supposed to be 938,000. The actual was 544. And that's why we have all these like big negative bank balances and potential special assessments. And so then it just lays out, here's the expenditures, what was expected, what was actual, and here is the cost of those expenditures that occurred in 2024. These reports right here, they're in Stelor colors. If you were to sign on as a property manager that wants to use us in a significant way, we then will brand this all up. We'll put your colors in, we'll put it all white labeled, all your branding, everything across it. It looks like it's your report coming from you, being provided to your users. Then we have this insurance offering, as I mentioned before, and all that it is you click this button and it automatically pulls answers to 105 questions, puts it in a CSV and connects it to one of our insurance providers. If you have your own preferred insurance provider, we could connect them into this too, or you can just go your usual route, get your regular insurance provider to take a look at this at renewal, and also click this and it just goes through to ours. You'll have 2 or 3 quotes from ours plus the 1 quote from your preferred insurance provider. 0 additional work. You have 2, 3, 4 quotes for your HOA or condo board to review and decide on. We also have this platform that just helps you manage all the properties that are on our platform, all your users, and as well, if you have a preferred vendor program, you can set them all up in here, select their service. We have basically a compliance tracker where you can request them to upload their WCB, their insurance, things like that, and then it will actually kind of manage your compliance in your preferred vendor program. And there's a bit of a marketplace where, say you do have like an asphalt repair that's coming up, you can create that and it will push basically out to a request for quote to the asphalt vendors that are approved in here that are compliant, and give them the opportunity to submit bids or quotes. Then we also work inside Rent Manager. So let me pull this up. Properties. Well, inside here, this is just kind of an example property that's inside the Rent Manager sandbox. Our portion of what we do is this user-defined fields. So if you click into this user-defined fields, this is a custom tab that we've built, and it's basically pulling all that information that I was just showing you that sits inside Stelor, and pulls it in here so that if you're using Rent Manager on a daily basis, as you manage your properties, as you work with your customers, as you do bookkeeping, all the features that come with Rent Manager, you also have the ability to see a lot of Stelor's data just ready to go right in here. And so things that we do is we'll pull in the opening balance, plan contributions, some KPIs like average contribution per unit, reserve fund, like you may have $1 million reserve fund. How much reserve is there on a per unit basis? Annual contributions, and like as they're compare on 100 square feet, same thing with the reserve. And then what amount is expected to be spent out of the reserve in the next 5 years, 10 years, and the total over the next 30 years. And what's that mean on a per unit basis? So you can see in the next 5 years on a per unit basis, they're expecting to spend about $10,416 per unit on capital replacement. And those are important numbers. Those are things that you can communicate. And then finally, we have the ability to pull up some of those annual reports. There's just links here to come into the annual reserve fund reviews, or to go into our viability score, which I actually forgot to mention this one. This is essentially a risk analysis for special assessment that we generate. And so it kind of looks like a credit score. We give you the score based on what we see. It also then breaks down into financial, funding, condition, expenditures, and management. Please connect with me either through email. You have my email now. You attended this webinar. I'm going to take the recording down off of this and email it out to everyone that attended. And if you'd like to book a meeting with me to learn more, or to talk about potentially putting some of your buildings on Stelor, maybe talk to us about us actually preparing a reserve study for you. The best way to test this out actually is to go get a reserve study written by one of those partners, and to have the software bundled in with it. Most of them will provide for an additional fee, you can get our software. So that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much.